stick your head out and yell, I'm as bad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore! First, you've got to get mad! I'm as bad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore! First, you've got to get mad! I'm as bad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore!
People generally forget the mistakes of the past. Citizens who were caught up in Hitler's Nazi Germany hardly noticed the gradual development of extremism, mainly due to high emotions and dazzling propaganda. But history often repeats itself. Femoplastic coffins, detention centres, armoured checkpoints and armoured military vehicles for civil purposes are well-documented facts. And witnesses who have worked for the United States military claim stores of guillotines located in Fort Lewis military facility. The latest revelation of Obamacare sanctions death by guillotine, code ICD 9E978. However, Obama was only following the mandate of the World Health Organization, one of the specialized agencies under the United Nations. Is the United States government getting ready for a fascist quasi-dictatorship involving forced religion? It would not be the first time that fascism and counterfeit Christianity have merged. Fascism and Catholicism have become synonymous throughout history. Recent developments have seen so-called Protestantism clasping hands with the Vatican. Protestantism once meant protesting against the Roman Catholic Church and her doctrine, labelling the Pope as the Antichrist as the Reformers proclaimed during the Reformation. An ex-Jesuit priest, Dr. Alberto Rivera, explains, in America, the Vatican's agents were at work to wipe out the Protestant movement through ecumenism, the secret sign to be given to the Jesuits worldwide when this was accomplished by the Vatican was when a President of the United States took his oath of office facing an obelisk, four-sided pillar that resembled the Washington Monument and the one in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. For the first time in history, the swearing-in ceremonies were moved to the west front of the Capitol, and President Reagan faced the Washington Monument on January the 20th, 1981. For those who are unfamiliar with the Jesuit order, it was the Catholic answer to counteract the Reformation sparked in 1517. Loyola Ignatius's formula for the formation of the Jesuits was approved by Pope Paul III in 1540. Napoleon Bonaparte had this to say about the Jesuit order. The Jesuits are a military organization, not a religious order. Their chief is the general of an army, not the mere father abbot of a monastery. And the aim of this organization is power. Power in its most despotic exercise. Absolute power, universal power, power to control the world by the volition of a single man. Jesuitism is the most absolute of despotisms, and at the same time the greatest and most enormous of abuses. The general of the Jesuits insists on being master, sovereign, over the sovereign. Wherever the Jesuits are admitted, they will be masters, cost what it may. Their society is by nature dictatorial, and therefore it is the irreconcilable enemy of all constituted authority. Every act, every crime, however atrocious, is a meritorious work, if committed for the interest of the society of the Jesuits or by the order of the general. The Vatican has historically used civil powers in past ages as she does today. Kings, dictators, presidents and prime ministers bow and scrape to the most powerful and richest organization on the planet, because it is politically expedient to do so. The Roman Catholic Church is secretly tightening her grip on geopolitics and the autonomy of nations who are secretly serving the Pope. Pope John Paul II and President Reagan worked together bringing about the collapse of the Soviet Union, with the first blow being the breaking down of the Berlin Wall. After years of the Vatican being accused of being un-American, the United States and the Holy See announced the establishment of diplomatic relations on January the 10th, 1984, under the Reagan administration. The Senate confirmed William A. Wilson as the first U.S. ambassador to the Holy See. The alliance between the United States and the Vatican benefited both political powers. The Cold War and Marxist atheism made the Vatican and the United States unlikely bed partners. As US presidents are well aware of the authority the Vatican wields, with just over 1.1 billion Catholics spread throughout the world, Jesuit educational facilities also spread and indoctrinate both Catholic and non-Catholic students with Jesuit maxims around the world, shaping the minds of future leaders so the Vatican is truly a force to be reckoned with. Some idea of the real estate and other forms of wealth controlled by the Catholic Church may be gathered by the remark of the New York Catholic Conference, namely that his church probably ranks second only to the United States government in total annual purchase. Another statement, made by a nationally syndicated Catholic priest, is perhaps even more telling. The Catholic Church, he said, must be the biggest corporation in the United States. We have a branch office in every neighborhood. Our assets and real estate holdings must exceed those of Standard Oil, AT&T, and US Steel combined. And our roster of dues-paying members must be second only to the tax rolls of the United States government. Avro Manhattan. The Central Intelligence Agency was the creation of Roman Catholic Knights of Malta member Alan Dulles. In recent years, CIA, NSA directors have been Catholic Jesuit-educated men. Historically, the confessional was the biggest intelligence-gathering machine of the Vatican. But now electronic surveillance has superseded the confessional as the single most effective tool of modern times, giving the edge on business, politics, and religion. A Catholic has first duty to the Pope before loyalty to a king, queen, or country. Perhaps this is why many misgivings are expressed about Roman Catholics holding positions that pertain to national security. Furthermore, we declare, we proclaim, we define that it is absolutely necessary for salvation that every human creature be subject to the Roman Pontiff, Pope Boniface. The Roman Catholic Church has always been savvy, influencing armies to do her bidding because wars cost money. Let's take a look at the leaders that the Vatican has used in the past to achieve her religio-political ends. King Clovis I, who united the barbarian tribes that eventually became the Franks, and then enforced the rule of the Roman Catholic Church during the decline of Rome after Emperor Constantine moved the capital of the Roman Empire to Constantinople. King Charlemagne enforced Catholicism and was then crowned emperor by Pope Leo III at Christmas in 800 AD. King Charles IX ordered the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of the Huguenots, French Calvinist Protestants, beginning on the 23rd of August 1572 in mostly Catholic Paris. King Philip II of Spain ordered the Spanish Armada to invade Protestant England in 1588. Dr. Alberto Rivera, an ex-Jesuit priest, also gives us information on the rise of Adolf Hitler. Another great inquisition was about to begin. Instead of wearing Dominican robes, they were wearing Nazi uniforms. Hitler's brown shirts, called the Nazis, back to the Vatican, used the same tactics of Mussolini beating and bullying opposition into submission, including Roman Catholics. Dr. Alberto Rivera. Hitler's book Mein Kampf was ghost-written by Jesuit priest Father Steinfeld. When it became known that Pope Pius XI supported Hitler, the Roman Catholic vote swept Hitler into power in 1933. Jesuit Father Himmler, an uncle of Heinrich Himmler, was a favourite of Jesuit Father General Count Hulk von Lidakowski. The SS organisation had been constituted by Himmler, according to the principles of the Jesuit order. The regulations and spiritual exercises prescribed by Ignatius Loyola were the model Himmler tried to copy exactly. Himmler's title as Supreme Chief of the SS was to be the equivalent of the Jesuit General, and the whole structure was a close imitation of the Catholic Church's hierarchical order. Walter Schellenberg. Munich University was founded with papal approval in 1472, and was previously the University of Ingolstadt. Eventually becoming a stronghold of the Jesuit order, the university also became the centre of the Counter-Reformation. Jesuit Petrus Canisius was the rector of the university. Both Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati, and Pope Benedict XVI were educated here. Interesting enough is that Pope Benedict XVI was a member of Hitler Youth. Joseph Mengele was an SS Nazi doctor. who also was educated at the Jesuit-controlled Munich University. Mengele identified himself as a Catholic and assigned himself to Nazi Germany's racial purity project, which reached its climax at Auschwitz. He was called Uncle Mengele by the children, whom he handed lollies to. Sadly, they were experimented on a short time later. The inmates who suffered at the hands of Mengele often died from shock and infection. In 1933, communications between the Nazis and the Vatican were welcomed by the Vatican's Secretary of State, Eugenio Cardinal Pacelli, a former papal diplomat to Berlin. During an elaborate ceremony on July the 20th, 1933, a concordant between the Holy See and the German Reich was officially signed and sealed by Vice-Chancellor Franz von Papen and Cardinal Pacelli. Hitler had a dream of a one-world government. Like many other Machiavellian men of past and present times, the Vatican will covertly support anyone whom they think will have a credible chance of unifying the world under one political umbrella so that the Vatican can force their apostate religion on others. The Guardian reported, as well as other sources, collaboration between the Nazis and the Vatican, helping war criminals escape the end of World War II. Dictator of Spain, General Franco, who championed the causes of Catholicism, fighting communism, using torture and execution to crush enemies or dissenters. While many are distracted by the false front of Zionism, the Roman Catholic Church has infiltrated and commandeered the United States without the public being aware. It is obvious that the US Constitution is eroding under the influence of the Jesuits, the crack troops of the Vatican. Breach of Amendment 6. NDAA Indefinite Detention Act without trial is an extension of the Patriot Act. Crafted by Jesuit Georgetown University educated Professor Yet Din. The assassination of foreign nationals, as well as US citizens abroad by predator drones, is also a breach of the Sixth Amendment. Chuck Hagel, Leon Panetta, and Donald Rumsfeld have attended Jesuit universities, and all have held the position of US Secretary of Defense. The mighty and widely ramified Order of St. Ignatius was powerful enough to procure by its interest far greater advantages to individuals than could any other corporation, fraternity, or even secular power. Jesuit General Jean-Baptiste Janssens. Breach of Amendment 4, spying on US citizens without warrant. Former NSA Director General Michael Hayden and incumbent NSA General Keith B. Alexander are both Roman Catholics and tools of the Jesuits. General Michael Hayden was also educated at a Jesuit university. Revelations from Edward Snowden reveal just how widespread this illegal surveillance extends itself. Many nations are holding conferences on how to counteract this problem. Public outrage has been expressed in places like Germany, but it seems that some German government departments, like BND, have implicit involvement with the NSA. Many governments portray disapproval publicly to the media, but secretly aid and abet US spy agencies. Breach of Amendment 2, the right to keep and bear arms. Michael Quigley, educated by the Jesuits, sponsored an amendment to the Patriot Act prohibiting the sales of weapons to people on the FBI terrorist watch list. The trouble is that the FBI now regards some protesters and independent journalists as a threat to national security, therefore deemed terrorists. The First Amendment is on the Roman Catholic Jesuit hit list and is of supreme importance to the Vatican. Amendment 1. Congress shall make no law of the establishment of religion. When the Protestant movement broke away from the Roman Catholic Church, Protestants still honoured the Roman Catholic institution of Sunday. The Protestant reformers never completely severed the umbilical cord from the papacy. In this quote, the Roman Catholic Church makes sport of Protestants for contradicting their beliefs. Protestants accept Sunday rather than Saturday as a day for public worship, after the Catholic Church made the change. But the Protestant mind does not seem to realise that, in observing Sunday, they are accepting the authority of the spokesman of the Church, the Pope. Our Sunday Visitor, February the 5th, 1950. By the annihilation of the First Amendment, the Vatican can sweep many other religions and beliefs into a web of deception and control, making Muslims, Buddhists, Protestants, and any other religion bow down in honour to the Vatican, therefore Satan himself. acknowledging her day of Sunday or Sun Worship Day, that was not kept by any of the disciples or any of the early churches, comprising Gentile or Jew. When the early church became corrupted by departing from the simplicity of the gospel and accepting heathen rites and customs, she lost the spirit and power of God. And in order to control the consciences of the people, she sought the support of the secular power. The result was the papacy, a church that controlled the power of the state and employed it to further her own ends, especially for the punishment of heresy. In order for the United States to form an image of the beast, the religious power must so control the civil government that the authority of the state will also be employed by the church to accomplish her own ends. The United States government has three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. The most powerful branch is judicial because they have the power to interpret the law. Even if a law or amendment is unconstitutional, they still reserve the right to make the final decision. The majority of the Supreme Court judges are Roman Catholic, with the other two judges being Jewish. Laws can be written in a sort of ambiguous way, crafted by Jesuit-trained lawmakers, so that Supreme Court judges can interpret them any way that suits the papal agenda. There are hidden, laying dormant in many of the states of America, insidious blueprints for the enforcement of Sunday law, and a gross breach of the First Amendment. Blue laws are used, which refers to laws enacted by the Puritan colonies in the 17th century to prevent recreational or commercial activities on Sunday. And during the 19th century in America, some southern and midwestern states passed laws to protect Sunday as a day of worship both on a state and local level. Penalties for non-religious activities on Sunday targeted Seventh-day Adventists, Jews, and other non-religious people for not attending church, playing cards, baseball, and menial chores. In 1889, A.T. Jones, a Seventh-day Adventist, spoke before a United States Congressional Subcommittee, the topic of the discussion being the Breckinridge Bill, which proposed the compulsion of Sunday observance in Washington, D.C. Jones's testimony helped to defeat this bill, and he became known for his abilities in defense of the bill and knowledge regarding freedom of religion. We can see the Jesuits working covertly through the European Sunday Alliance organization to enforce Sunday as a day of rest in the guise of a secular family day. Before 9/11, it was hard to imagine that a government could enforce such laws as warrantless wiretaps on citizens, detention without charge or trial, or assassination of citizens deemed a threat to national security. Is it that hard to imagine a government now enforcing religious observance by fine, imprisonment, and eventually the death penalty? While you're thinking about that question, there are drones circling the skies ready to obliterate anyone the CIA, NSA, or Department of Defense give authorization to kill. There are facilities in the United States that qualify as a quasi-neo-fascist system of dealing with civil unrest by potentially enforcement of tyrannical laws. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, sounds eerily similar to the Committee of Public Safety, which beheaded many during the French Revolution. Recent DHS advisors and secretaries like John Brennan and Janet Napolitano are Jesuit trained. Jesuit education was described by Jesuit General Pedro Urupe in these terms. Jesuit education would consist in the creation of multiplying agents. Lisa Monaco, former prosecutor, was an advisor to FBI Director Robert Mueller and advised the DHS on counter-terrorism during the false flag operation of the Boston bombing. Little do people know that Barack Obama was groomed by the Jesuits and worked in a Christian grassroots organization called the Gamil Foundation under the direction of Jesuit priest Gregory Galuzzo, who became his mentor.
And does he keep in contact with the organization now?
You know, once he became a U.S. Senator, he's very much in demand. So it's only on occasion we get to interact with him.
Well, an occasion is fine, isn't it?
Once in office, Obama appointed many Jesuit-trained people to key positions of U.S. government. In fact, no other U.S. president in history has appointed as many Jesuit-educated individuals as Obama. Recently, the president recommended apologists for assassination of Americans J. Johnson as new Secretary of Homeland Security, seen here at Jesuit Fordham University. J. Johnson was appointed General Counsel of the Department of Defense and is considered one of the legal architects of the US military's current counter-terrorism policies. J. Johnson is an American civil and trial lawyer, so his legal experience allows him to make the US Constitution a very grey area which only lawyers have the talent to do. J. Johnson has made quotes such as, "Belligerents who also happen to be US citizens do not enjoy immunity, where non-citizen belligerents are valid military objectives." So as J. Johnson take the position of Secretary of Homeland Security, one must ask exactly what does the DHS have planned for the future, considering his relevant experience. An alarming fact is that the French Revolution's Committee of Public Safety protagonists Louis-Antoine de Saint-Just and Maximilien Robespierre were Jesuit educated. This period had been labelled the Reign of Terror. That being said, let us now turn our attention to the portion of Scripture that tells of beheadings in the last days for not adhering to the man-made Sunday laws. Revelation 24. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads, or in their hands, and lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. The testimony of military personnel that guillotines are being stored at US military bases raises concerns and interest. Maybe this information could tie in with Revelation 24 on the subject of beheading. Apparently this way of execution is one of the most painless, and can be administered with ruthless efficiency on a mass scale, sending stern warnings to dissenters publicly. The Bible describes the Sunday law as the mark of the beast, by the Vatican's own admission in the following statement. They admit Sunday has nothing to do with the Word of God and is their own invention. Sunday is our mark of authority. The Church is above the Bible. And this transference of the Sabbath observance is proof of the fact. Catholic record. The first observance of Sunday keeping by Christians that history records is in the 4th century, when Constantine issued an edict not requiring its religious observance, but simply abstinence from work, reading, "Let all the judges and people of the town rest, and all various trades be suspended on the venerable day of the sun." Bishop Eusebius of Caesarea claims that Constantine and his army were marching toward Rome when Constantine looked up at the sun and saw a cross, with the Greek words, "In this sign you will conquer." At the time of the issue of this edict, Constantine was a supposed newly converted Christian, but also a sun worshipper. In a shrewd political move to unite Rome, Constantine amalgamated pagan sun worship and Christianity, transferring the Sabbath, Saturday, to sun worship day, Sunday. The organization of this system of worship became what we know today as the Roman Catholic Church. Sun worship can easily be seen here in the monstrance, which carries the consecrated host for adoration. The communion wafer, which represents the body of Christ, is a sun disc-shaped wafer. So the Catholic priest, by supposed sorcery, turns the wafer into the body of Christ. The created creating the Creator? The Roman Catholic Church has a long history of quackery, following the superstitious even to this day. At every turn you'll see within the Vatican or Catholic churches sunbursts. Neither Christ nor the disciples or the early churches ever mentioned Sunday as holy day. Yet many claim that because Christ rose on Sunday, that this day must be the new Sabbath. But history refutes this argument for the reason that Christian churches kept the Sabbath up until Constantine's edict in 321 AD. And yet some may claim that the Sabbath is exclusively for the Jews, but the Bible puts this claim to rest. Genesis 2:3, "And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it." This is clearly evidence that Adam and Eve kept the Sabbath. Many today are still confused which is the seventh day of the week. The majority of society are unaware that the Sabbath, Saturday, is the seventh day. The Jews came into existence much later in history. Another fact is that the early churches such as in Corinth, Galatia, Thessalonica, Ephesia, Colossae, All kept the biblical Sabbath and were comprised of both Jew and Gentile. The Apostle Paul, in his second letter to the Thessalonians, foretold the great apostasy which would result in the establishment of the papal power. He declared that the day of Christ should not come, except there come a falling away first, and the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And furthermore, the apostle warns his brethren that the mystery of iniquity doth already work. 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 3, 4, and 7. Even at that early date he saw creeping into the church errors that would prepare the way for the development of the papacy. The United States of America was a Protestant country, as the people who fled Europe were fleeing despotic institutions like the papacy. Historians claim this haughty power killed more than 80 million people for such crimes as owning a Bible or whatever the prelate deemed as heresy. The CIA World Factbook states that only 23.9% of Americans are Catholic. But the US government is mostly either Catholic, Catholic-controlled, or Catholic-educated. So the interest of the Vatican will be paramount in the near future, and Sunday observance shall be enforced by law, and the world shall be enlightened concerning the obligation of the true Sabbath.
Pope Francis is ushering in a new era for the Catholic Church, and so are the crowds. Take a look at this image. It was taken on March 13th, the day Francis was elected.
One of the many challenges Pope Francis will face is getting the Vatican's financial house in order. Mark Phillips looked at the Church's history of secrecy and scandal.
The Vatican is more than the world's largest religious institution. It's a business in trouble. There are backroom financial scandals at Vatican Inc. In an old stone tower behind the papal apartment is the Vatican Bank. The Church's various departments, its priests and employees, keep accounts here. Secret accounts, hidden from the prying eyes of international regulators. An Italian court investigating the bank found documents showing some accounts had been used for money laundering and other illegal, and for the Church highly embarrassing, activities. Vatican watchers like Marco Politi have studied the court documents that verified the bank's transactions have not always been kosher.
There was money of the mafia who was recycled through the channels of the Vatican Bank, and also bribe money to political parties in Italy went through the Vatican Bank.
With dark financial clouds hanging over the Vatican, the European Union insisted the bank open its accounts to public scrutiny. When it was too slow, tourists felt the pinch. When European bankers suspended the Vatican's credit card facilities, visitors couldn't use plastic to buy Sistine Chapel tickets. $30 million of Vatican money in Italian banks was seized and only released when the Church promised to reform. Now Swiss lawyer René Brulhart, who helped clean up other secretive European banks, has been brought in. But still the bank keeps many of its dealings private and not just from outsiders. South African Cardinal Wilfred Napier, who sits on a committee that's supposed to sign off on the Vatican's books, told us he still can't get the information he needs.
I'm one of those 15 cardinals that sits on that committee, and we sign our name to the report. I want to know that I'm signing something that is actually reflecting the truth.
There's another scandal with a girl who disappeared in the Vatican 20 years ago, and they say they may have found her remains. The Italian police are leading the investigation, but instead of helping them, the Vatican is obstructing the investigation. It's likely they knew about this and stayed silent. And on top of all those cases of pedophilia, this is just disgusting.
The list of controversial events involving Catholic priests or Vatican officials reads like a tabloid. Reports of sex abuse, pedophilia accusations, alleged large-scale corruption, and possible ties with the mafia. While the media, especially in Italy, has been having a field day with the scandals, the Vatican either stayed silent or rebuffed all accusations.
Well, David Lorenz, a director of a group called the Survivors Network of those abused by priests, doubts the new pope will bring much change to the Vatican.
Nikki Davis says she was sexually abused by a Catholic brother, but she's no longer afraid to talk about it. Yet she says she knows of 2 other child abuse survivors who say they've been threatened not to talk to the Royal Commission.
Some victims are reporting having received death threats because the information, the knowledge that they have, their personal experience is too damaging to the Catholic Church.
Facebook in particular is the most appalling spying machine that has ever been invented. Here we have the world's most comprehensive database about people, their relationships, their names, their addresses, their locations, their communications with each other, their relatives. all sitting within the United States, all accessible to US intelligence. Facebook, Google, Yahoo, all these major US organizations have built-in interfaces for US intelligence. It's not a matter of serving a subpoena. They have an interface that they have developed for US intelligence to use. Now, is it the case that Facebook is actually run by US intelligence? No, it's not like that. It's simply that US intelligence is able to bring to bear legal and political pressure to them, and it's costly for them to hand out records and one by one, so they have automated the process. Everyone should understand that when they add their friends to Facebook, they are doing free work for United States intelligence agencies in building this database for them. And every other intelligence agency that can either hack Facebook or who can do a favor with US intelligence.
Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. The law was expanded back in 2008 and it allows the NSA to spy on Americans without a warrant.
And essentially this would extend the government's power to warrantlessly wiretap Americans for another 5 years.
2 U.S. senators have asked the NSA just how many people it's spied on. But the agency's keeping their lips sealed, and you'll never guess why. They say dishing that information would violate your privacy.
Do you ever feel like someone's watching you? Well, if you're a UK citizen, the government is attempting to step up its public surveillance policy and even snooping on your personal emails. Despite CCTV cameras already a major fact of UK life, there's now plans to store personal data, including information from social networking sites. As RT's Ivor Bennett reports, it's the taxpayer who could be footing the bill.
Soon you could be watched everywhere you go in the UK, even where the cameras can't see you. All your emails, texts and phone calls will be monitored under a new anti-terror spy plan. The government will know which websites you visit. It'll even snoop on your private Facebook messages. No matter who you are, all your personal data will be stored for a year in a massive surveillance operation privacy campaigners condemn.
Britain's already one of the most watched societies in the world. The number of CCTV cameras is estimated at nearly 2 million. Now the government wants to monitor all electronic communication as well, including social media, taking surveillance to a level never seen before.
Just what you say in calls and messages won't be kept, but the government will know exactly who you speak to, when you do it, and where you are. It'll be stored by broadband and mobile companies, but security services will have real-time access at the click of a button, secretly living your life with you. Digital rights groups say it'll leave people living in fear of Big Brother.
Last 2 years, every single tweet sent in the US has been stored in a massive archive.
It's the ones being watched who are paying for it too. Cybersecurity experts predict it'll cost taxpayers over $1 billion to be spied on. Even then, there's no guarantee they'll be safe from other prying eyes.
Clear yet why the FBI would neglect to tell activists that there was a potential assassination plot surrounding them. What we do know is that new documents obtained by the Partnership for the Civil Justice Fund, a U.S. human and civil rights advocacy organization, have revealed that the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. military, and private corporations all cooperated together to monitor and investigate Occupy Wall Street protesters as, quote, domestic terrorists and, quote, criminals. Now, the more shocking revelation, the headline of this story, is that reportedly buried deep within the government file, mentions of a plan to use snipers to assassinate Occupy protesters and the movement's leaders in various cities throughout the country. These
video cameras caught trucks arriving at the World Trade Center from about August 23rd until every night until about September 2nd, September 3rd. And the trucks were arriving at about 3 o'clock in the morning when everybody else had left the building, including the janitorial trucks. And the trucks were leaving at 5 a.m. right before the AAA personalities of Wall Street got to work to start their day. Something was brought into that building that would help with the detonation. There may have been work done on the detonation before. It may have been going on for months, but whatever they needed at the very end, they came and brought in that 10-day period.
The purpose of that infiltration was what for?
Well, the purpose is what the Roman Catholic system has all the time as her own purpose, is to infiltrate, to penetrate all the areas of life where the Roman Catholic can have control and access for the coming world government. What that means is, in preparation for that world government, the Roman Catholic institution, especially since the establishment of the Jesuit order in 1541, throughout all these 500 years, they've been in preparation and through infiltration and penetration of every level of society in order to take over the world politically and religiously. There are two doctrines that define very well these dangerous goals of the Roman Catholics.
I wanted to know whether you would say a word. A lot of the people around the world know that the attacks on 9/11 were an intelligence black op, and so we were wondering whether you would say a word to support a real investigation that would get to the bottom of it, because it seems to have set off a fake holy war or a religious war.
It's very difficult to know.
No, but we know that bin Laden didn't do it, and there are also Jesuit networks that are helping cover it up. Will you say something, sir?
Hello, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us today, a brand new guest. Her name is Karen Hudis. She is an attorney, she is a banker, and she is a whistleblower. Karen Hudis, thank you so much for joining us today from Maryland. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I couldn't be happier than to be here on your show.
Well, you work for the World Bank for a better part of 20 years. You are an Ivy League trained attorney. You went to Ivy League school. I think you went to Yale. You work for the World Bank as a lawyer. You're a banker, and you were a whistleblower inside the World Bank, not just one time, but several times. It crescendoed with a big, almost $1 billion, whistleblowing fraud, malfeasance in the World Bank in Indonesia. And for that, you got a pink slip in 2009. Congratulations, my dear.
Thank you.
You are one of the good people. Listen, I called you the other day on the pre-interview, and I said, Karen Hudis? She said, yes. And I said, boy, I want to interview you about, I have you all set up. I want to just do a little pre-interview about banking. And I said, boy, things are a mess, huh? Oh, no. Things aren't a mess. No, we can fix this. And I was like, wow, this is refreshing. And you said, everybody knows what's going on. Everybody in the world knows what's going on with America. We know who the thugs and the criminals are. And you made a reference to a baby. Tell me how the rest of the world is looking at our Federal Reserve and our banking system and how the U.S. is acting in the global world of finance.
Well, their game is up. When they were signed on 100 years ago, President Wilson knew that he had sold the United States downstream. And he really regretted it. And there were a couple of presidents who tried to set things straight. And both of those ended up assassinated. One of them was JFK. One of them was Abraham Lincoln. And our current president, Barack Obama, is trying very hard to do what he can to make it possible for those of us in the know to fire these thugs. He doesn't want to get himself shot. He's leaving it up to us. And we're doing a good job. I've been in touch with all 50 governors. There's a special governor's council, which has one of the co-chairs is my governor, Martin O'Malley. And I've been writing to these guys, and I've been saying, okay, we are not going to let our country get sold downstream. You are going to do your job. And, it's not an easy thing to do. It's pretty dangerous. People have gotten into a lot of hot water for standing up to these thugs and crooks. And by the way, you don't have to take my word for it. There's a very accurate study that was done by the Federal Institute of Technology. They used data showing who owns all of the world's corporations, 43,000 of them. And they showed that there is a group of thugs that have bought these companies up and controls them behind the scenes. A lot of this is secret. You won't read about it in the press because they bought up the media. So the stories that people are hearing every day from their favorite newscast, this is all, what those companies want you to know, not what the reality is. And a lot of people are onto this. I think the latest survey about the trust of the American people in their media, it's tanked. It's, most people, more than a majority, knows that they're being systematically lied to by these thugs. So anyway, getting back to the Federal Reserve and the Bank for International Settlements, these groups are in cahoots with the biggest crooks of all, the Jesuits that bought up Bank of America, and they have little secret deals to try to apportion the riches of the world. And in the meantime, all of the countries of the world know that this thievery is going on, and we have been working together. I've been writing all of the ambassadors for the last 5 years since I was fired illegally. They knew I was their lawyer. They knew I was telling them the truth. And I said, you're not going to get away with this. And there's a group of World Bank whistleblowers from different countries, and one of them in particular, Elaine Colville, who's Scottish. The two of us have been writing to the UK Parliament, and the UK Parliament on the 20th of July just published our statements. My statement was, okay, guys, we're running out of time. It's time to get serious and tell these thugs and crooks that they're fired. And Elaine Colville said the UK Parliament better do its job. And that's up there for everybody to read.
Well, you're talking about being fired. You were telling me in the interview yesterday, and I want to work on this, and it's a theme that a lot of people have brought up on my side, a lot of very smart people, and you're kind of backing them up, and you're saying the rest of the world doesn't want to live under this yoke of the Federal Reserve, the Treasury system. They want to get rid of the dollar. They want to do away with the dollar. There's inflation, and what a lot of people aren't talking about is this uprising in Egypt is fueled in part with all this inflation, and we are exporting inflation around the world, and governments are saying, hey, hold on with the dollars. We don't know if we need any more of these dollars. We want to use a different currency, a gold-backed currency, a Bitcoin. Hungary has got rid of the euro supposedly, and they're issuing their own currency so they can get away from the inflation. Is that what you're seeing? A move away from the dollar on a grand scale?
Okay, what I'm saying is that we don't have to wait for anybody to fire the Fed or the Bank for International Settlement, because all the central bankers are part of this big club in Switzerland. What we should simply do is use our choice. The states, some of them, have already started recognizing silver and gold, the precious metals, as currency. They're entitled to do this. They should do this. There are other alternatives like Bitcoin, and there are other bankers that have set up currencies that are backed fully by precious metals, and we, the consumers, can choose which currencies to use that are legal. And that's what we're going to do in very short order. Because I can tell you, and you didn't follow up on one of the things I just said, so I'll say it again. We are talking about the biggest thuggery of all, and that is the Jesuits in the Vatican. And one of the things I have just found out,
well,
because
the new Pope is a Jesuit, right?
That's right. And
there have been reports published reports of the allegations of the Vatican laundering money on a grand scale. Haven't heard too much about that recently, but that's I think that was before the most recent Pope got put in there. But yes, I mean they have some sin there, don't they?
Greg, I'm going to tell you something which I just found out about, because let me step back a little bit and say how I got involved in all of this. They say follow the money. That's what I did. I saw that people were being lied to about the money, and you're not allowed to do that. When bonds are issued on the capital markets, and I bought a World Bank bond, you're entitled to accurate financial statements, and they were not being audited according to the auditing standards. So I sued the World Bank, and I sued KPMG, and then 188 ministers of finance settled my lawsuit. But I couldn't get that thing implemented. So I was trying to find out why not. And let me tell you what I just found out. I always thought that the CIA was the problem and the other intelligence agencies. Guess what? There's a grand intelligence agency that the Vatican puts out, and all of those other crooks are operating under the Vatican Intelligence Agency.
The money
That's what's going on.
The money is about the control, and the Vatican Intelligence Agency, the World Intelligence Agency, they're talking about we're fighting over money, over what money we're going to use, and who controls the money.
That's the thing I'm saying, Greg. They're not fighting. They've all agreed. The fighting is what we're led to believe. They're all in cahoots, just like all the banks are in cahoots. All of these intelligence agencies are in cahoots too. So we are completely being bamboozled. It's like a big theater of the absurd for the world. And in the meantime, every single citizen is getting ripped off, big time. It's all an agreed. For example, what's going on in Syria? I'll tell you what's going on in Syria, and this is because I'm not working just by myself. I'm working with a lot of whistleblowers, and there's one whistleblower in particular.
And just so you know, you're in contact with World Bank members also around the globe.
Yes. There's one of us from India. There's one of us from Ethiopia. I forgot the last time I mentioned the list. I forgot one of the best, most intelligent of us is from South Korea, and we are all working together, just like these thugs are working together. But I was going to mention about what Mark told me about Syria. What's really going on is that there's natural gas, but you have to have a pipeline to get it to the market. So Qatar, which has all this natural gas, wanted to run a pipeline through Syria, and then they were going to reach the European market. Well, who's supplying the European market with gas?
The Russians.
The Russians. Okay. Saudi Arabia went to the Russians and said, if you stop protecting Syria, then we're going to sell you arms for cheap. And Russia said, no, I want my market for natural gas in Europe. So all of this business about dead babies and sarin gas, that is just all to keep us confused. Everything that's going on in the news is simply to keep us confused. We don't need to be confused. What we need to do is we need to turn around to these crooks, with the crooks at the very top, and we need to say, no. Well, you're not going to rip us off anymore.
Well,
We've had enough.
I know you speak fondly of the president, and he is my president, and I have respect for the office, but he has signed into law the NDAA, where you can, drag somebody off and hold them intentionally, and, any quote-unquote terrorist. He has made all these drone strikes. I mean, his Justice Department just put Jesse Jackson Jr. in jail, and not a single one of these bankers has been tried, including people who have done money laundering for drug cartels and for people on the terror watch list. We have Jesse Jackson Jr. in jail for 30 months for $750,000, and John Corzine allegedly stole $1 billion. So, these guys are running wild.
He's an actor. He's told to play his part.
Oh, that's sad.
It is, but everybody is an actor.
Let me back up here. You're telling me the president is just an actor, just somebody to play a role, and don't get in our way. You're really not the president. We say you are, but you're not.
What I'm trying to say is that those presidents of ours who refused to go along with these crooks' agenda got murdered. All of them. And so there's a little bit of leeway, and they're doing what they can. And don't forget, we have to play our part, which is we have to admit that we have been bamboozled, and we're not going to be bamboozled anymore. And we will then take back what's ours. We won't let the crooks continue to rob us.
But this is
We've
going to be
got a role to play.
This is going to be a painful process. I mean, they're going to come out and say, "Oh, you want your accounts insured? Well, you have to take a bail-in. Do you want your?" I mean, this is what they're going to say. This is what they said over in Cyprus, which a lot of people say the IMF was involved, the ECB was involved, that this was a test market, Cyprus. And you want your insured deposits? Well, you have to agree to bail-ins. You have to agree to haircuts. You have to agree to all this stuff. And
that is only, Greg, if we stay stuck at one level of the theater. We don't have to stay stuck at that level. We can go up to the different level, which is what I'm telling you. Not just the central bankers, but the Vatican. For example, people don't know that their IRS revenue is going to the Vatican. They don't know that the municipalities are pre-funding their pensions for billions of dollars when it's unnecessary. We have got to sit down and we've got to follow the money and figure out where it's going and say, okay, that's our money, that's not your money, and we have to take it back. That's all.
Isn't this going to be painful? Aren't there going to be defaults? Aren't there going to be, a guy rates me, I've said this a couple of times in interviews, from Detroit, 29 years with a firefighter or a police officer. His funding for his pension is $9 billion in red ink, and they're going to get pennies on the dollar. And, I hear that, bankers are going to get 75 cents on the dollar, but pensioners are going to get 20, 10, 15 cents on the dollar. I mean, there are $3.7 trillion underfunded pensions. We have $10.8 trillion on deposit. We have $33 billion in insurance. I mean, there's going to be a bunch of defaults, isn't there? I mean, is it going to be painful to take it back?
At the wrong level of the play. You are looking at paper currency. There was an agreement starting in the early 1900s to take all of the wealth of the world, the treasures, the gold, the diamonds, priceless treasures. These are now in a big vault in different places, buried. And this all can come out. But it's not going to come out until people start recognizing this reality. We have all got to look beyond. We have to pierce the corporate veil. That's the statement in law. When you look behind who owns the corporations, we have to pierce the corporate veil. We have to, all of us, do our homework. We can't say, oh, money is too complicated. Central banks are too complicated. We have all got to sit down and come to the table and see what's the real story. And we have to be responsible about it. And then we'll agree that we played a part too. We were bamboozled. We allowed these bankers to buy up media and tell us lies and accept the lies, one story after another. Are we going to look at the fake reels about dead women and children from chemical warfare? Chances are those were actors.
I got to tell you, I would think you were absolutely crazy if I didn't know and I went online and saw your resume and saw your deep resume and saw you work for the World Bank for 20 years and know you're attorney or you were the senior counsel for the World Bank. And this is just eye-opening to hear you talk like this. I'm not putting you down. I'm just saying people should realize that you're not a kook. You were 20 years with the World Bank as their senior counsel. You were connected to world bankers globally and other whistleblowers, and you're saying that we've been robbed, and we are being robbed.
Let's go back 15 years, okay? And let me just say that everything that I'm saying, you can go on my website, www.kahudis.net, and you can go through the chronology, which is what happened in 2000 when I got involved in reform inside the World Bank, where the people who own the World Bank, it's like a big cooperative. The U.S. owns 16%, and the rest of the countries, 188 of them, own different amounts, and you get to vote in accordance with how powerful you are. Okay, so I was part of the board's decision that they were going to allow the World Bank to have more money, but only if they improved the human resources. And I was on that committee, and the agreement was that those managers that were doing a good job would get promoted, and those managers that were doing a bad job would either get training or they would get fired. And that reform got completely rolled back. We brought in somebody from IBM to do this, and he came to me. He said, Karen, I don't understand it. I say a manager's good and needs to be promoted, and that one gets fired. I say somebody is crooked, and that one gets promoted. What's going on here? He said, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to last. Alberto Bazan, he got fired. And after that, I just tried to find out what was going on. And you can watch and see exactly what was going on until I got involved in the Philippines, where the man who was the president of the Philippines, Joseph Estrada, was robbing the country blind. And what he did was he sold the second largest bank, Philippine National Bank, to a borrower who owned Philippine Airlines, Lucio Tan. His airline was in default to Philippine National Bank. And so I said, you can't disperse the rest of the loan when this crook has gotten all those employee shares.
That was nearly $1 billion. That was just so everybody knows, that's nearly $1 billion in malfeasance.
Well, what happened was we canceled our loan for $200 million. The Japanese canceled their loan for $200 million, and the Philippines, who had their people who had their money on deposit in the bank, withdrew it, and the Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation had to bail out the bank for $500 million. And then the World Bank, at the end of that project, had to write a summary about how the project had gone. And they said, well, it wasn't a success, obviously, but we couldn't have known. I said, of course you could have known. I told you. And that's when they tried to fire me. And so I went, yeah.
They did fire you.
No, not at that point.
Oh, in 2009 they did.
2003.
Ultimately, they did.
But here's the beautiful part about it. The World Bank is many, many things. It's also a knowledge bank. And there was a political scientist, Jacek Kugler, who came to the World Bank. He had actually been involved in the defense intelligence industry first. And he developed a very accurate model, which, it's garbage in, garbage out. But I modeled rule of law at the World Bank. I didn't realize that the World Bank was a microcosm of the world. But I did know that if the U.S. didn't start playing by the rules, that we were going to lose the ability to handpick the president of the World Bank.
Lose our leadership.
And that's what happened.
The rest of the world's going to go, you're crooks, no thank you.
So first I went to the Treasury Department, and I said, we've got to start playing by the rules. And they ignored me. So then I went to the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, which at that point was chaired by Joe Biden. It had Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama as junior members. But it was Senator Lugar who wrote 3 letters to the World Bank saying, don't fire this lady. And they fired me anyway. But in the meantime, I had showed the board that I was working on rule of law. And so I had a lot of people backing me in the beginning. You should see how many people are backing me now. I have the whole world backing me. And it sounds like I'm being grandiose. But I'm not being grandiose. I'm just giving people a play-by-play book. And so this last bit that I'm telling you about, I didn't know any of this when I first started out. All I knew was that we were not playing by the rules. And then I had this very fancy stakeholder analysis. And this stakeholder analysis is showing me not only rule of law inside the World Bank, but the World Bank is a microcosm for the world. So I'm now dealing with rule of law. I'm dealing with justice in the world. Do you think people who see that I'm for real are going to help me? You better believe they're going to help me. I have gotten the most incredible help. It's just spectacularly beautiful to see.
Well, down here on the ground level, could we have bail-ins? Could people have their money taken from them? I mean, these guys are not going to give up. I mean, they're going to hang on to power.
No, of course not.
Could we have war in Syria? I mean, the president is
certainly have war. We can have war. We can wipe out the whole human race. There's no question about it. We have the capabilities to do that. But if we decide to all work together and all follow the money and all listen and all do our homework, what's going to happen is this gold that's buried in this vault is going to come out and pay off all these debts, and we are going to, each of us, have more money than we know what to do with. Each person on this planet. I'm telling you, that's what the actual facts are. And I can show
there's plenty of money out there. So the guy with a pension up in Detroit who's going to get 10 cents on the dollar, that doesn't have to happen. The student loans for $1 trillion doesn't have to happen. Our national debt for $17 trillion doesn't happen. I mean, Karen, that's a lot of dough. That's a lot of money.
What we're fighting about is not money. What we're fighting about 2 things. We're fighting about control, but the better way to describe it is we're fighting about love. We're fighting about whether we love our fellow man and whether we have self-respect. That's the real issue that we're dealing with here. And if you then think about the people that we are entrusting to be our spiritual leaders, who are actually doing the opposite. They're heading all of the spy agencies of the world and bamboozling all of us. We have got to sit down and sort things out.
Could there be, I'm going to get down to granular level, down to the street level, down to the individual level. Could there be bail-ins? Could people lose their insured deposits? Could people lose money? Could the stock market crash?
No.
Is any of that going to happen?
We're dealing with. That's not what we're dealing with.
Do what?
No, that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with whether we continue as humanity and have an Earth or whether we blow ourselves up. That's what we're dealing with. That's the issue. Whether we love ourselves and each other enough to save the world or whether we're all going to go to hell in a handbasket. That's what this is about.
Karen Hudis, you have enlightened me, my dear. You can find out more at K-Hey Hudis. That's Hudes, K-A, Karen, K-A, Hudis, Hudes.net. Thank you very much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. I hope you come back.
We're all in this together, and I think we're going to do just fine. That's the whole point. We do love each other, and humanity will continue, and we're going to be fine.
Thank you for enlightening us on USA Watchdog. Thank you. You're a great guest. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. You're a great listener.
The modern system of Babylon is a religious, political, economic power. The book of Revelation describes a system of international spiritual darkness and confusion with tentacles that are far-reaching, even wrapping themselves around state economies. The term Babylon is derived from Babel, and signifies confusion. It is employed in Scripture designating the various forms of false or apostate religion. In Revelation 17, Babylon is represented as a woman, a figure which is used in the Bible as the symbol of a church, a virtuous woman representing a pure church, a vile woman an apostate church. Babylon is further declared to be that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth, Revelation 17:18. The power that for so many centuries maintained despotic sway over the monarchs of Christendom, is Rome. The purple and scarlet color, the gold and precious stones and pearls, vividly picture the magnificent and more than kingly pomp affected by the haughty see of Rome. And no other power could be so truly declared drunken with the blood of the saints, as that church which has so cruelly persecuted the followers of Christ. Babylon is also charged with the sin of unlawful connection with the kings of the earth. As we near the closing of world history, we can see that the kings of the earth are looking to the Holy See for a religious political alliance. U.S. President George W. Bush has described the Pope as one of the greatest moral leaders of our time. Many other U.S. presidents have made strong connections with the Vatican, as diplomatic relations were forged in 1984 by President Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II. Prophecy is actually unfolding in front of our eyes. Who would have thought that a country founded on Protestantism would fraternize with the Vatican on such a level? Many of the Protestant churches are following Rome's example of iniquitous connection with the kings of the earth. The state churches, by their relation to secular governments, and other denominations by seeking the favor of the world. And the term Babylon, confusion, may be appropriately applied to these bodies, all professing to derive their doctrines from the Bible, yet divided into almost innumerable sects, with widely conflicting creeds and theories. The Roman Catholic Church is said to be the mother of harlots. By her daughters must be symbolized churches that cling to her doctrines and traditions, and follow her example of sacrificing the truth and the approval of God, in order to form an unlawful alliance with the world. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Revelation 17 verse 5. There are some Sunday-keeping churches today that call the Pope the Antichrist and expose all the infidelity of the papacy. Yet they keep her Sunday institution that is her mark of her self-proclaimed ecclesiastical authority. All denominational churches are Babylon. Babylon has been fostering poisonous doctrines, the wine of error. This wine of error is made up of false doctrines, such as the natural immortality of the soul, the eternal torment of the wicked, the denial of the pre-existence of Christ prior to his birth in Bethlehem, and advocating and exalted the first day of the week above God's holy, sanctified day. Sunday keeping is a papal institution established by Roman Emperor Constantine in 321 AD. Christians kept the true Sabbath up until this time, but under fine, confiscation of property and under the sentence of death the fraudulent Sabbath was enacted. Still to this time many people think the seventh day of the week is Sunday when in fact it is Saturday. The Sabbath was founded in the creation, and God blessed the seventh day, and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. Genesis 2:3. History from a biblical perspective indicates that the Ten Commandments, which included the Sabbath, were given to Israel after they were delivered out of bondage in Egypt. God's people had failed to remember the divine precepts due to slavery. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Exodus 28. Symbolism for the following scripture. Wine represents false doctrine. Fornication represents unlawful relationship. A beast represents a kingdom, empire, political power or government. All nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Revelation 18:3. Here we see the connection between the merchants of the earth and Babylon. In some way the Vatican has entangled themselves around the earth's finances, industry and commerce, and to a lesser extent the apostate Protestant churches who follow the papal institution of Sunday keeping have done the same. The Encyclopedia Judaica claims that the Rothschilds bear the title, Guardians of the Vatican Treasury. We can only speculate how wealthy the Vatican truly is. Here are some interesting statements by Avro Manhattan. Some idea of the real estate and other forms of wealth controlled by the Catholic Church may be gathered by the remark of a member of the New York Catholic Conference, namely that his church probably ranks second only to the United States government in total annual purchase. Another statement, made by a nationally syndicated Catholic priest, perhaps is even more telling. The Catholic Church, he said, must be the biggest corporation in the United States. We have a branch office in every neighborhood. Our assets and real estate holdings must exceed those of Standard Oil, AT&T, and U.S. Steel combined. And our roster of dues-paying members must be second only to the tax rolls of the United States government. The Vatican has large investments with the Rothschilds of Britain, France and America, with the Ambrose Bank, with the Credit Suisse in London and Zurich. In the United States it has large investments with the Morgan Bank, the Chase Manhattan Bank, the First National Bank of New York, the Bankers Trust Company, and others. The Vatican has billions of shares in the most powerful international corporations such as Gulf Oil, Shell, General Motors, Bethlehem Steel, General Electric, International Business Machines, TWA, etc. The Catholic Church, once all her assets have been put together, is the most formidable stockbroker in the world. The Vatican, independently of each successive pope, has been increasingly orientated towards the U.S. The Wall Street Journal said that the Vatican's financial deals in the U.S. alone were so big that very often it sold or bought gold in lots of $1 million or more dollars at one time. The Roman Catholic Church is the most powerful organization on earth. Roman Catholic Church membership, both lay and clerical, in 2007 was estimated to be 1.147 billion people. The Vatican's vast intelligence service ensures both political and financial success, through its members who are obligated by sworn allegiance to the Pope. Often a conflict of interest arises between a Roman Catholic and whatever position he holds in state office, finance, industry. The Vatican is hell-bent on world domination. The Vatican has controlled the known world before, and prophecy tells she will do it again. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Revelation 13:3. When Protestant churches shall unite with the secular power to sustain a false religion, for opposing which their ancestors endured the fiercest persecution, then will the papal Sabbath be enforced by the combined authority of church and state. There will be a national apostasy, which will end only in national ruin. There will be a time when the United States economy will collapse and the world will be plunged into economic chaos, which will have the most severe social consequences. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. James 5 verse 1-2. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. James 5:3-4. Here is the biblical illustration of the fall of Babylon, both religious and economic. God will bring judgment of the Vatican, and economies will crumble. standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city! For in 1 hour is thy judgment come, and the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. And the merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city, that was clothed in fine linen, and purple, and scarlet, and decked with gold, and precious stones, and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster, and all the company in ships, and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off. Revelation 18:13, this verse tells us that in the last days there will be slaves who are bought and sold. Human trafficking is the illegal trade of human beings for the purposes of reproductive slavery. Commercial sexual exploitation, forced labor, is a modern-day form of slavery. The epidemic of modern slavery is the second largest criminal industry behind narcotics and before the illegal sales of weapons. Slavery is alive and well, and there are many forms of slavery. The conveyance or trade of women, children and men from one area to another for the purposes of forcing them in conditions of slavery will increasing. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Revelation 18:2. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation, and kindred, and tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven, and earth, and the sea, and the fountains of waters. And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead, or in his hand. Revelation 14:6-9.